Hey everybody, Aaron here, and welcome back to the Anime Talk, the show where we discuss things that need to be discussed sometimes. Today, we're actually going to be talking about, obviously, Berserk. I think this was bound to happen on my channel eventually. I think it was bound to happen on someone's channel eventually, where we discuss why did Berserk turn out the way it was? Why does everyone hate it? What is the concepts that people hate so much? So we're going to go into detail about that. We're going to talk about, I think what people had issues with it. We're going to also talk about why maybe some of those issues are unwarranted. And also, I think we're going to talk a little bit about adaptations today, a little bit. I'm not going to per se go into a super huge discussion about that because actually I'm going to save that for another anime talk where I'm going to talk something about a little bit more on the words of adaptation and what I think that should really mean. But let's first talk about Berserk history. So this way people know what they're talking about a little bit more. So the series was made by Kentaro Miura, and I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong. I'm sorry, but I'm terrible with Japanese names. And it came out in the actually 89s. So in 1989 it came out, so late 80s technically it came out. And has been running since that time period. It has always been done in a very interesting way where Kentaro talks about how, and I remember reading an interview one time where he focuses solely on making sure that the art for Berserk was amazing. He would spend a considerable amount of time on how it looked, how it was done, what the pages actually conveyed. Not doing what a lot of other companies did, hiring lots of people. He was done with a small group of people, and it took a lot longer for them to do it, of course. I mean, I'll tell you guys right now, like the studio I think that they're running with right now for Berserk manga, I think is only 91 people, and people might say that's a lot of people. That's not a lot of people for a manga studio. That's pretty small, actually. That's crazy, but it goes to show you that he's always been kind of against the norms of how he made Berserk. Now, going into a lot of other stuff with Berserk, you know, one thing that's interesting is people forget that also the studio that did the original Berserk anime was actually one of the studios that worked with Pokemon. Yeah, they did Pokemon. So, what does that say about it? That says that at the time they were a small company because I mean Pokemon of course was huge back in the 90s. I mean no one could doubt that. Pokemon was growing as a popularity. But that was a smaller company because besides that one little thing, they really had no other works besides that. They had other stuff of course, but it wasn't like anything popular. So of course Berserk became their kind of thing to mold and shape and do what they wanted to do with it. Of course with Kentaro's wishes and stuff like that. But I want to put that in perspective because I think that's very important for the rest of the stuff I'm about to talk about. So remember who did the original Berserk animation. I just want to make sure you know that. Now, the newest person that did the newest Berserk manga, or Berserk anime, excuse me, is another company that's only known to do like moe stuff and kind of smaller works and stuff like that. This is probably one of their most grandiose projects that I think they've taken on. Maybe I saw before that I know they took on a few other things before, but none of the stuff that they've done has ever been that big in terms of something like Berserk big. And that goes to show you where Kentaro does things slightly different. He does not go with the typical trope of, oh, let me use the biggest studio, the best known studio. It looks like what he does is he goes for the studio that's the underdog and lets them work magic with stuff and work what they feel that is the appropriate action for that type of show. Now, I say this because one thing about Berserk, and I'm going now into the actual concept of Berserk, is that it's a dark fantasy. Unlike a lot of other things, that's why it has such a cult following rather than a kind of big explosive following like a lot of other stuff in this kind of field. The concepts of fantasies have always been kind of cheerful, especially in the 90s. They were not done in a dark manner. I mean, before that, they were always dark, but in the 90s when Disney started taking up a lot of the Brothers Grimm's works, which if you guys do like read any books outside of, simple stuff, the Brothers Grimm had a collection of short stories that were essentially what Disney has now. So Snow White, Red Riding Hood, etc. And what they did, of course, Disney took those stories and made them, for kids. They made them so kids could go into this lore, know some stuff about the past books and works, but have it where it's edible for them, not so it's so scary or terrifying. Because here's a little factoid for you guys. I'm gonna give you two stories and their versions of Disney stories. So, for example, case in point, Little Red. We'll start with Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood, in the lore of anything outside of the original Brothers Grimm stuff is a simple story. And I'm not saying Disney per se took this, but I'm saying that other companies that have taken that have always had it where, you know, the little Red Riding Hood is going to the grandma's house, blah blah, etc., gets eaten by a wolf, and because, you know, the wolf's disguised as the grandmother, and, you know, but is able to be saved or get out of there somehow by, you know, stroke of mystical genius, right? In the original Brothers Grimm story, Red Riding Hood was eaten by the wolf, but stood inside of its stomach because the wolf was so big. Like, that's how big Wolf was compared to Red Riding Hood. So the wolf ate her in one shot and actually put her into the stomach of it. And then the hunter came along that would save her life by gouging out the stomach of the wolf and ripping Red Riding Hood out. That is dark. That is what the true lore is for it. Little Red Riding Hood was dark. The Little Mermaid, another story I want to go with you guys and girls, and I've said this before, but I'll be quick about it. That story with the Brothers Grimm version was very dark. That was a story that was like, oh my god. You know, I'm not going to spoil it because I think you guys and girls might want to know it, but let's just say that she doesn't end happily ever after in the real story. Really does not. It actually is pretty messed up what actually happens in the real story. Comparison of, you know, the Disney story where everything's all okay, everyone, you know, falls in love with one another, they deal with their kind of differences and stuff like that. In the original story, it's a lot darker. Now, why Berserk is so unpopular, or more so not why it's not popular enough, is because of that dark fantasy when it came out. Coming out in the 90s probably was one of the biggest banes and probably one of the biggest stigmas of Berserk. I mean, honestly, that was a time period that people did not want dark stuff anymore. They wanted to have this kind of light, fluffy things. They wanted to have a time of more joyous things. And I'm not saying that the 90s were all joyous. I'm not trying to say that at all. But I'm saying that a lot of the stories were redone to be joyous and to be for kids, rather than be dark like Berserk is. And Berserk, of course, if you know, is dark. It is very, very dark. That is one of the big reasons why it's not popular. You know, like, people ask, why is this not popular? Why is it because the studio didn't take it? You know, no, it's because of that. Now, what happened with Berserk, and you know, because I've been a fan of Berserk since I was, I want to say 12 years old. So I mean, that was a decade and some change ago. One thing that was popular about Berserk to me was the fact that it dealt with the kind of darker tones, because at that point I've read the Brothers Grimm, all their works. I've read, at least not all their works, I've read most of their works, because I read a lot, of course. But I read most of their stuff, and I loved that kind of dark truth behind it. So I ended up watching Berserk and going, wow, you know, having this kind of dark fantasy and, you know, not the light-hearted stuff that I was so used to growing up with a kid, was interesting to me. It fascinated me. I was like, oh my god, I can't get more. I want more of this. So I started reading the manga, of course, and I caught up with the manga wave of when I was always caught up with the manga. So every kind of like several months that a new chapter came out, I read that, so on and so forth. But, you know, it took a long time for those Berserk manga chapters to come out because, you know, Miria does a kind of interesting thing with his work. You know, like I said before, he doesn't use big studios. He uses a smaller studio. And, you know, just look it up right now. Look up the studio that handles Berserk. The studio that handles Berserk, the manga, the publication for it, is a studio of 91 people. That was as of 2010. So, I mean, they could have slightly more now, but I highly doubt that many more. In retrospect, other companies that have, you know, other manga productions could be in there anywhere from a couple hundreds to thousands. This only has 91. That's a very, very small factoid. I mean, that's very, very small. And so that's interesting to show that, you know, Kentaro has never been, I think, one of the you know, he might not say it in interviews or anything like that, but I think he's really meticulous about how he does things, and also how he does his work to make sure that it's not owned by someone per se huge. He wants it to be owned by someone who will take care of it, but in the sense that he knows, and I think he has control over it, because that's the one thing that I know with Berserk, is that he will not release stuff constantly about it if it's not perfect. I mean, that you could see it in the publication, you could see it in his work. I mean, how much little details go into it. You know, there's an interview floating around the internet where it says that he takes a day to do a single page of Berserk. Take that in retrospect of how long that probably is. You're looking at maybe 3 months to do a single chapter. And, well, it's like, well, wait a second, a day, if it's 30 pages, that's only 1 month. Yeah, but the thing is then you have to edit it, you have to make sure everything's working, you have to make sure that the diagrams are working, the actual wording's working, you have to publish it. You know, that doesn't take 2 days alone, that takes several days after that. So take maybe a good 2 months to do something. That's crazy, but that shows a meticulous styling that's really important. Now, you know, let's go into now the kind of Berserk issues that people are having with Berserk 2016, which are numerous. I mean, I felt so alone. Me and my friend felt so alone when we realized how many people hated Berserk. And while I know that not everyone hates Berserk, because a lot of people did, kind of come to arms with me and went, oh, we like Berserk too, don't worry. I was like, wow, you guys hated this. You said, oh, the CGI is terrible, it's trash, it is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, blah, blah. You know, you're obligated to your own opinions. I've never ever disrespect. And you know what's funny? I know one friend of mine who I gotta get annoyed with it, and I'll be honest with you, it pisses me off sometimes. It really does. But he goes, your wrong opinion, and I get pissed off about that because I know he's joking. Don't get me wrong, but it's a statement that goes, well, dude, it's kind of messed up, because I always feel that you have opinions that are your opinions. If you hate something, feel free to say you hate it. There's nothing wrong with that. I think what's worse is when people go, oh, well, it's okay. They're kind of mishmashed with it, like, it could have been better, but it's not bad. Hey, you hate something, say you hate it, scream it, say I don't like something. Do it in the proper sense. I mean, be respectful. Don't be screaming out I hate this and that in bad places. I'm saying that you can be respectful of others' opinions, but at least know that if someone argues against you, goes, oh, I like it, know that you're gonna have to then defend your point. You're gonna have to be like, well, I hate it, let's go into battle of debates. Now, Berserk 2016 looks to me very good. I like the way they did the manga CGI work. It looks like there's heavy brush strokes on characters' faces. It kind of reminds me of a manga come to life, and I think that's really nice. And I think that's also because that is something to me that I wanted from this. I wanted it to be something against the norm of every CGI work. This doesn't look like every CGI work. I mean, yeah, it's not the greatest thing in the world. I'll say that right now. I'm not a huge fan of this, but I do like it. I don't think it's bad. I think it's interesting and unique. It has its own style to it. I know people always go, well, the 2D imagery in the beginning is so great. I think that would have been too easy for Berserk. I think that having those 2D images would have been like, well, it would have looked gorgeous, but I've seen it before. And I think that's one thing that Berserk doesn't want to be, is this thing you've seen before. It's always been the thing you haven't seen before. The stuff that happens in Berserk is against the stuff that most people are used to from this story. That's the good thing about it. That's the beauty of Berserk, that it goes against norms, and that's why I like it so much. Now, another thing we'll go into details with is that I know people are going non-stop about how they wished Berserk was different in a way of how its story was handled. Like, for example, the adaptation of the manga being 6 chapters thrown into one episode, because as we know, it skipped the Black Swordsman arc, most of it. It skipped various others. I think volume 18, or what was it, 18, 16 or something like that, were skipped, and they started throwing in stuff from the newer ones thrown in too. I'm okay with that, folks. I think that what they have to do is they have to speed up the process. You guys don't realize, I think a lot of you forget how long this series has been running. Berserk manga, again, has been running since '89. Do you really want that from an anime? You don't want this anime to go. I mean, I know people go, "Oh, I want the best." Dude, most people have a short attention span when it comes to anime as it is. If this actually took how long it took, you know how freaking impatient people would be? Like, "Oh my god, we're only in the first arc. Oh, I want the next arc to show up, or the next arc." And then what they did was they took the adaptation of it, and they took the manga, they worked it so it's sped up. I think from here on out, it's going to be sped up even more. But then it's going to slow down to when it gets to the point that it's really important. Then the important stuff is going to take its time. But they skipped a lot of the unnecessary stuff. It wasn't necessary. You didn't need to see Guts get his arm right away. Or his, people forget. I love how people keep saying this in the comments. You haven't seen the original anime. Yes, I have. I've seen it like 15 times already, it seems like. What's funny about the original anime is that the first episode was an epilogue, essentially, of the whole first anime. Because it started already where he had the metal arm and he had the giant sword, the actual Dragon Slayer. It started with that. So, yeah. Don't you think that maybe put the pieces together here? That him having no arm right away, but then having the cannon arm and all that, and the daggers and all that stuff that he had from his friends in the Band of the Hawk. Do you think that maybe they're doing something similar? Maybe? Huh? It's like, realize it. Maybe they are doing that something similar. So maybe next episode will then go into more details about how, he got his sword, or how he got his arm, or maybe this next several episodes to do it. But I like the way they did. I like where they got rid of the fluff and they just went, hey, we're bringing Guts back. He's gonna kick some ass, and then we'll go into the detail stuff because they want that impact, and they got it. Regardless if people hated this or not, they got people viewing it. I'll say that right now. So, what am I going to say about this? Is Berserk 2016 the best anime I've ever seen? Hell no, it's not the best anime I've ever seen. It's got a lot of flaws. You know, the animation's sometimes stiff. It could have been a lot better handled. I think that I know people are big fans of adaptations, and I know it could have handled that slightly better. But I think Berserk 2016 is something that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think that you really need to sit down, pay attention, less to how much they are adaptating from the actual manga, and more on how they're doing it against the norms of most anime that keeps coming out in shovel loads. This wants to be different, and it's trying to be different. I think that is awesome, and I think that people should respect one another if they're saying, you know, like, this is trash, or because there's a lot of people I noticed that really do like this show. Equally, there's a lot of people that hate it, but you know, I don't think there's any reason why people have to say they hate it. Just don't watch it then. You hate the show so much, don't watch it. I don't know how hard it is to say that. I don't know why people seem to be so hell-bent on watching something they don't like. It's weird to me, but whatever. Anyways, guys and girls, that's it for today's very controversial, probably, anime talk. I hope you guys got some knowledge from it. I wanted to really kind of talk about this because I love Berserk. I'm not saying I'm a die-hard fan. Like, I don't own everything. I don't eat, breathe, sleep Berserk, but I've seen Berserk a lot. You know, I've seen I really, no bullshit, I've seen maybe the first anime maybe a good, like, 7 times all the way through. I've seen the movies, of course. I've seen the movies like 3 or 4 times each. And I've seen this, of course, twice. I actually saw this episode twice, yes. And what else? I've read the manga twice. I've actually read the whole series of the manga that's come out so far twice and stuff like that. So I am a fan of Berserk. I'm not a die-hard fan, but I am a huge fan of Berserk. So I just want you guys to kind of understand why it's so weird and so different from everything else. Anyways, guys and girls, I'm going to end this because I don't want this going on to 20 minutes. I will talk to you later. Hopefully you like this. Please hit that share button. Please hit the like button. Hit, comment below what your thoughts of Berserk are. And as always, we'll talk again later. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.